So I recently released my review of Star Wars Episode VII, The Force Awakens, and my consensus basically was that while I enjoy the movie immensely thanks to incredible visuals and J.J. Abrams' just phenomenal overall direction, which captured all the good elements of the Star Wars universe just immaculately on screen, despite all that, I was disappointed with the story due to rehashed plot elements from A New Hope, as well as underdeveloped and sporadically developed characters. The review overall received mixed feedback, which I somewhat expected, not to the degree that it ended up being, but I do understand why some people might have, given it a dislike, because it is a movie that a lot of people love, and I came across as very negative, even though I definitely enjoyed the movie. So in this video, I want to clarify some of the things that maybe some of you guys might have misinterpreted, and just basically get a few other things out of the way. Obviously, you should watch the original review if you haven't done so yet, if you want context about some of the things that I'm going to talk about in this video. Now, before making this video, I decided that I wanted to watch the movie again so I could absorb all the little details that I may have missed. And I've got to say, I enjoyed Force Awakens even more the second time and the third time. Not like I ever disliked the movie in the first place, like a lot of you assumed, but I don't blame you for thinking that because I did have a really negative tone. But as I said in my previous review, it is a great fucking movie that I thoroughly enjoyed. It is a triumphant return for Star Wars. But at the same time, I didn't fall in love with it. It has clear flaws. I will say this though, I think everyone should watch the movie at least a second time. You will really notice small little details that you might have missed before. Now that you know the plot, now that you know what to expect, you can focus in on just little nuanced things that will give you more context for some of the things you might have had a problem with. For example, I will concede that Kylo Ren losing the fight against Rey wasn't as unreasonable as I made it out to be initially. No, I didn't miss the fact that Chewie had shot him prior to the battle. It's just, I didn't think it was enough to justify Finn holding his own against Kylo Ren or Rey beating him at first. In my first viewing of the movie, while I saw Kylo Ren getting shot, it just never really came across how badly he was injured, and I realized why when I watched the movie again. I noticed that for some reason, the gun's high caliber impact was gone after Kylo Ren was shot. So he was shot, he wasn't sent flying or anything, and then when Chewie started shooting all the other soldiers around, all the other stormtroopers as he was making his way out of there, they were just sort of dropping like flies, but not being flung around like rag dolls. And it was just like they were being shot with a regular rifle, so the impact for some reason was gone. And the small inconsistency made me perceive that Kylo Ren's injury really wasn't as bad as it was made out to be. It made me think that the real intention of that was that awesome moment when he's like thumping his injury to fuel his pain and hatred, to fuel his dark side powers. That's what I thought that was mostly for. It didn't come across to me that it was just a severe injury that really crippled him. But on the second watch through of the movie, I really did notice, holy shit, this really injured him. Like, he was pretty badly crippled. I noticed just little nuanced things in Adam Driver's performance when he was in the battle, and it just made me realize how exhausted Kylo Ren was. Add on top of that the fact that he had just killed his father and was not in the most stable state of mind, along with the fact that he was most likely rusty as hell from the fact that he hadn't fought a Force user in such a long time, and it all actually made much more sense the second time around. And then there's also the fact that his training wasn't complete, as Snoke hinted at, but for me that wasn't really a big factor because he clearly had received enough training that he would easily be able to beat both Finn and Rey if he was in his prime, if he was in tip-top shape. So that wasn't really a big factor for me. What really sold it for me was the fact that he was injured, he was rusty, and that he was sort of in this shattered state of mind. Could the movie have done a better job in making Kylo Ren's disadvantaged state a bit clearer? Sure, but at the end of the day, it made sense. I've also got to say that I actually liked Kylo Ren a lot more in my second watch through of the movie. He really grew on me the second time. I will admit that in my first viewing, I went in there with certain expectations for the character after watching the trailers. You know, he looked really menacing in those trailers, and when he didn't meet those expectations, I was really conflicted. But for my second viewing, I could actually focus on his arc for what it was, and I found myself much more intrigued. I still wasn't a fan of how bratty and whiny he was. Maybe it's Anakin PTSD, and I get that to some degree that's the point of his character, but just because something is the point doesn't mean I have to like it. But there is definitely something very compelling about a villain who is so internally conflicted, who has so much to live up to, who is so insecure, and who has so long to go before peaking. And you know, I love the fact that he wears this really menacing looking mask, and underneath that mask is this perfectly normal looking young man rather than some kind of disfigured entity. I mean, it summarizes his character entirely perfectly. He's a man whose big shot, tough guy attitude is nothing but a masquerade for the fact that at his core, he's just kind of a boy who hasn't really grown up fully yet. It's just a very unique angle, I think, for Star Wars to explore in terms of villains. And I think there's no denying that his story and growth have just incredible potential in future episodes. And you know, that's what Force Awakens does really, really well throughout its whole run, is establish immense potential for all the newcomer protagonists and antagonists. They have all sort of been awakened in some way. Now, while I did find Kylo Ren's character much more compelling in my second and third watch through of the movie, I still did get the sense that the direction of this character significantly sacrificed a sense of overwhelming threat. The antagonistic forces of Star Wars Force Awakens, whether it be Kylo Ren, the First Order, Phasma, what have you, they all start out incredibly menacing, but as the movie goes along, that sense of menace just sort of begins to wither. It's all kind of backwards. Shouldn't the sense of menace rise as the movie goes along with the rising action? And while I get that to some degree this was intentional, especially with Kylo Ren, whose calm, collected, tough guy masquerade is supposed to slowly break down as the movie goes along, while I do get all that, and while I do think that's a very compelling angle to explore for the villain, in doing so, the movie failed to deliver on the sense that the heroes had overcome some incredible odds. It all just felt too easy. For me, it never felt like the Starkiller base mission had any chance of failing. Furthermore, the First Order and Kylo Ren never evoked the same sense of overwhelming peril that they did in the scenes prior, which is weird. Again, it's all backwards. And as a result, Force Awakens' climax felt more like an anticlimax. You know, that seemingly impossible something to overcome, and the build-up to overcoming it, that's a very fundamental aspect of storytelling and to any compelling plot. And in the case of Force Awakens, a lot of that I felt was sacrificed in favor of a new and compelling angle for the villain of this new trilogy. So it seems to me that, like his lightsaber, Kylo Ren is sort of a double-edged sword. I'm also still not a big fan of the Han Solo death scene. I was hoping I would like it more the second and third time around, but it just didn't happen. I still feel it's far too predictable. I still feel like it's too reminiscent of The Empire Strikes Back. I feel like it's a bit fan fiction-y, and like J.J. Abrams is indulging himself a bit, and there was just far too little background on the family history for me to care, and we have seen Han and Kylo Ren together far too little for the death scene to have really the impact that it could have had we seen more of their dynamic. I really feel like if they would have spent more time developing Han and Kylo Ren's relationship, the gravitas of that scene could have been just much more elevated. I feel like at this point in time, Kylo Ren, to me, he's still sort of a stranger. So it was like watching a stranger kill someone I care about rather than watching someone I know kill someone I care about. It's a big difference. When it comes to strangers, my knee-jerk reaction to seeing them do something atrocious is to just be pissed off at them. Whereas if it's someone I know doing something atrocious, I feel the need to sort of reason in my mind and find some deep motivations and intentions in ways that I wouldn't do for a stranger. And there's just more of a sense of shock when it's someone you know killing someone you care about, if that makes any sense. So Kylo Ren, for all intents and purposes, for me, he's still just a stranger. I mean, I'm sure he's going to get a lot of development in episodes 8 and 9, but we haven't gotten there yet. So at this point in time, to me, Kylo Ren is a stranger. So I didn't really feel conflicted for him when he did what he did to Han Solo. I mean, I could see the inner struggle thanks to the awesome acting, and I know that the story tells you that he's conflicted between the dark side and the light, with the light side kind of pulling him a bit. But at the end of the day, when he pierced Han Solo with his lightsaber, all I felt was pissed at him. Why? Because he's a stranger to me. He's still a stranger to me. I didn't feel like I had to reason this. I just felt like he was a prick because I just didn't really know much about him. And again, I'm sure there's more to it than that, but that's just what I'm feeling right now until episodes 8 and 9 hopefully develop his character more. So he's an intriguing character. I just wasn't invested in him enough for that scene between Han Solo and Kylo Ren and his eventual death, Han Solo's death, for all that to be as effective as it could have been. The one true shock value that came from that scene was just the knowledge that the iconic character, the lovable character, Han Solo, was actually dead. I got no shock factor from the fact that Kylo Ren actually went through with it, you know? I still believe that Han Solo's death should have been saved for episode 8, with episode 7 making room for the audience to get to know Kylo Ren, or Ben Solo, his dynamic with his father, his dynamic with Leia, and all this other cool stuff that would have helped in building up that climactic moment. And again, look, I get that episodes 8 and 9 will develop this and that it'll somehow amplify episode 7. I'm sure that's gonna be the case, but I gotta judge episode 7 on its own individual merit. And as its own individual story, Han Solo's death scene still just doesn't do it for me. I also still had a big problem with Rey's sudden growth spurts throughout the movie. And I know a lot of you are trying to reason this aspect of the movie. I get that she is, that the Force is strong in her. I get that her powers were awakened when she stumbled upon Luke Skywalker's lightsaber, and after Kylo Ren used the Force on her to read her mind and what have you. But even then, I still feel like it takes time and training to learn how to channel the Force to the extent that Rey does. Despite her lack of training, it only takes her 3 tries to Force mind trick the stormtrooper into releasing her and leaving the door open. And it only takes a couple of lightsaber swings for her to learn how to use the Force to focus in and to channel it to be able to defeat Kylo Ren. And while I get that it's not like an impossible occurrence in the lore of Star Wars or anything like that, and while I'm sure there are a lot of plausible theories for why Rey could channel the Force so efficiently in Force Awakens, on a storytelling perspective, when you take Force Awakens and look at it in its own merit as an individual story from a storytelling perspective, to me, it just feels way too convenient, it feels cheap, and it just doesn't feel satisfying. Luke Skywalker's growth in episode 4, that actually felt legit, like he earned it, like he worked for it. But Rey's sudden clairvoyances in channeling the Force in episode 7, it just feels God-sent, you know? Now, we do see signs throughout the movie that her memories might have been altered at some point in her life. I mean, when she stumbles upon Luke's lightsaber, she seems to remember things that she didn't know were in her memories. She does incredible feats like expertly piloting the Millennium Falcon and yet having no idea how she did it. Like, she just doesn't know how the hell she did any of that. So, who knows? Maybe she did receive some kind of training prior to Force Awakens, and maybe that's why she's so fluent in using the Force. Maybe she's beginning to remember certain things, like muscle memory or something, I don't know. But regardless of these possibilities and theories, when you judge Force Awakens for what it is as its own individual story, I just can't shake the feeling that her sudden clairvoyances in the ways of the Force just, again, feel kind of cheap, unsatisfying. It just doesn't feel earned on a storytelling perspective when you look at Force Awakens as an individual story. It's like if Neo in The Matrix suddenly learned how to fly in the middle of The Matrix 1 just because, just out of nowhere, he just feels like he can fly now because he's the one. Like, that doesn't make sense. Neo underwent this long and extensive journey that eventually got him to being the one. That, to me, made sense. Force Awakens, it just felt like she just gained these powers. They were God-sent, and it just didn't feel satisfying. It felt convenient and cheap, and like it just wasn't earned. Now, don't misunderstand, just because of this aspect of her character, that doesn't mean that I hated, Rey or anything like that. I think she's a great character. I really liked her. I think she's very likable. She has an air of mystery about her past. I really do think that her memories have been altered in some way. She's got this connection to Luke Skywalker that we don't really quite know about yet. I'm just very intrigued by Rey overall. I mean, she's obviously the main protagonist of the new generation of Force users of this next generation Star Wars, and it'll be interesting to see how her heroic journey leads her to doing heroic things or what have you. And throughout my second and third watch through of the movie, I did get more clarity on her development throughout Force Awakens. While her sudden clairvoyances as a Force user, that bothered me, but her character development it turns out that I really actually liked once I paid attention to it. She goes from being this lonely, self-reliant individual who's sort of stuck in the past, waiting for her family in Jakku and just sort of hinged and locked in place. And then she starts to trust other people and rely on other people, and she starts looking forward and into the future and just ahead in hopes of achieving what could be her true potential, because her past, her being hinged in Jakku was definitely keeping her away from her true potential, her destiny, or what have you, and she sort of begins to realize this towards the end of Force Awakens, and that is just a lot of cool things about her. And like Kylo Ren, she's set up in a way that there's just a lot of potential for growth and development in future episodes, and I think that's something that a lot of people are going to look forward to in episodes 8 and 9. It's something that's going to keep people coming back. I also found that Finn actually grew on me more the second and third times I watched the movie. Again, never disliked him to begin with. I never disliked any of the characters, but for Finn, I did initially find that his sudden decision to defect from the stormtroopers, that it was glossed over a bit too quickly. Like, I get the basic plot reasons for why that happened, but I felt like it happened way too quickly. But then I noticed little details like the fact that after his first deployment in Jakku, Phasma, whatever, asks him for the rifle for inspection, likely to check the activities of his time in the village massacre, if he, partook in some of the activities and the orders that he was given, which he didn't. And so right there and then, he had to make a snap decision or risk being re-indoctrinated by the First Order. So his snap decision to say, okay, I gotta get out of here, that actually made a lot of sense in my second and third watch through. So he got Poe out of there, he needed a pilot, and then they hit it off. It was pretty freaking great. And I also enjoyed his character development more because I realized that the character is clearly being set up to be this sort of new Han Solo. The arcs of the two characters are actually very similar. And I mean Episode 4 Han Solo. If you think about it, they're both outcasts who are on the run and who, after some reluctance, decide to stick around and to fight with the good guys and fight for a good cause despite the many risks. I mean, they could just run off and live their own life, their own good, self-contained life. They could live in their own bubble, but they are influenced by other characters, and then they decide, hey, I want to stay, I want to fight, I want to do something good for the galaxy. So a lot of parallels between the two characters. But unlike Han Solo from Episode 4, I did feel as though Finn was just a bit too useless throughout most of Force Awakens. I mean, he's on screen a lot, but he doesn't really contribute too much to the cause. I mean, he has a good heart, he has good intentions, and he's there, he's present, but he never really ends up being all that useful throughout the course of the movie. I would describe him as sort of the poor man's Han Solo, just Han Solo 0.5. But at the same time, because Finn isn't in his prime in Force Awakens like Han Solo was in A New Hope, that does leave a lot more potential for growth and badassery in future episodes. So in that sense, there's something good that can come off of this. It'll be interesting to see where the journey of this ex-janitor stormtrooper takes him. Speaking of Poe, I did forget to mention in my original review that I absolutely loved the chemistry between Poe and Finn. They just hit it off right off the bat. And they're like soulmates, like they were brothers in a past lifetime or something like that. And that becomes apparent just the moment they meet each other. It's pretty great. It's just always a pleasure to watch those two interact. And just honestly, all of the three newcomers, all of the main protagonists of Force Awakens, they're all in general very likable. They're all just great characters overall. Again, I did have some problems with the way some of them were developed, but at the end of the day, they're very compelling characters that I'm looking forward to see in future episodes. Just very welcome additions to the Star Wars universe. I'm still not a fan of the honed-in romantic tension between Finn and Rey, and I heard a lot of people say, Yong, there is clearly no romance going on between them. It's all just, it was all jokes. And yeah, they joke about it a lot, but there's also moments where Finn clearly has some feelings for Rey. I mean, when he tells Rey, hey, come with me, leave with me, run away with me, basically. I mean, you've got to have some kind of intimate affection for someone to ask him that kind of thing. So I didn't quite buy that kind of romantic tension. I think they make good friends, good chemistry in that sense, but romantically, not quite there yet. But for the most part, just great chemistry between all the characters. So despite the flaws of Force Awakens, look, I think what really matters is that in the end, every newcomer has been set up in such a way that there is just immense potential for growth and development. The movie had a lot to set up, I get that, but in the process, I think it did spread itself a bit too thin in some areas. But now that the pieces are finally there, I just cannot wait for episodes 8 and 9, where they're gonna probably put all these pieces they've set up into motion. It's gonna be phenomenal. I mean, there's just so much potential in where the Star Wars universe can go with episodes 8 and 9. Furthermore, every other aspect of Force Awakens is just absolutely impeccable. I love how the returning cast reprise their role like they never left it. I love BB-8. He's still the most adorable, the most lovable android that I've ever seen in any movie, honestly. I love BB-8. You have no idea how much I love BB-8. I want a life-size BB-8 that actually, that I can remote control or something. I would love one of those. I don't care how much it costs, because I love BB-8. I'm a fan. And then you got the practical effects, the action scenes, the technical marvels, the artistic direction, and just the overall direction that J.J. Abrams took Star Wars into. It's just phenomenal. I mean, this movie truly is the Star Wars movie that we deserve after the lackluster prequels. This is the movie that Star Wars fans have been waiting for. Is it perfect? No. I still do believe it has its flaws. It's worth pointing out. But that doesn't mean it's not a great fucking movie. It is an amazing movie. So in the end, I'm very glad that I watched the movie. a second and a third time, and I'm glad that I got to do this video, that I got to say more things and just clarify some things a bit more. And it's something that I recommend everyone does. Watch the movie a second or third time. You will just, I guarantee you, you will notice little new things that actually add a lot to your understanding of the new direction of the Star Wars lore with this new trilogy, and just little things that may explain some of the things that you may have initially had a problem with, or that may develop characters a bit more than you initially thought. And I've got to admit that for my first viewing of Force Awakens, I came in with certain expectations for the plot and the characters, which made me judge them with preconceived notions, which is something that I shouldn't do, but I did anyway, because, you know, it just happens. But after setting those expectations aside for my second and third viewings, when I saw things for what they were rather than for what I expected, it became much more clear to me what the new direction was, and I loved it. It's intriguing, it's compelling, it's awesome. Kylo Ren in particular really, really grew on me after I set aside my expectations and just saw his arc for what it was. I think it's really compelling. It's a very different take on a Star Wars villain. It's a very interesting new angle that I'm really looking forward to see fully explored in episodes 8 and 9. That still doesn't take away from the fact that, as a result, on a storytelling perspective, that great sense of threat, that overlooming sense of threat, that's sort of been sacrificed significantly as a result. But, you know, if they can really harness Kylo Ren's new angle to the Star Wars villain and harness that and really make something cool out of it for episodes 8 and 9 and something really compelling, it might be well worth it. And then you have other things like the fact that I still think Rey's growth spurts are still too sporadic, kind of cheap, unsatisfying, just way too convenient. I still think Finn is more or less useless throughout most of the movie. Poe could have received a bit more development. Han Solo's death scene still needed more build-up, and the movie treaded way too much familiar ground in its overall plot and structure. But I definitely walked out of the theater with a more fulfilling and a far better understanding of the direction that the new Star Wars trilogy is headed in, and I'm really, really freaking excited. And that's what Star Wars Force Awakens really does really well. Again, it sets up a lot of potential for both the characters and just the overall series. And that's awesome. I still can't say that I loved Force Awakens, but I can definitely say that it was a great movie. It's a lot of fun, and it's definitely the Star Wars movie that we deserve after those disgusting prequels. I mean, this is the movie that we've been waiting for. J.J. Abrams did an amazing job in bringing to life the good aspects of Star Wars and making a very nice and cohesive package that, for me, falls short in certain aspects when it comes to storytelling. But what it does great is leaving a lot of potential for growth and development and awesomeness when it comes to plot, characters, and just the overall Star Wars lore and series. So there you have it, folks. My thoughts on the movie after my second and third viewings. Thank you for tuning in. Let us know in the comments below your thoughts and opinions about what I said, and of course, express your opinions. I'm sure we'll have varying opinions, and I honestly don't expect this video to be received very well either, because I still have a lot of negative things to say. Even though what I'm really saying is that it's not perfect, but I still think it's a great movie that I absolutely enjoyed. That's what I'm really trying to say. But, you know, feel free to rate the video however you wish. I just at least hope you got something out of this. And I would most certainly love to hear your thoughts. Maybe you'll change my mind in certain aspects with enough convincing or with an educated argument. We'll see what happens. Just let us know in the comments below your thoughts. And to be further updated on possible future movie reviews, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.